Superman is back and he's facing a threat bigger than ever before. Let's go into Superman 2. So Superman 2 is a movie that was released in 1980, starring Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, Terrence and directed by Richard Lester. And straight away, just to point out, I'm reviewing the theatrical release of this movie, not the Donner cut that was released in 2001. There were some backstage issues that went on during the production of this movie, in that Richard Donner, the original director and the one that directed the first movie, was fired by the production team halfway through filming. Because of this, Richard Lester's then come in and he has reshot most of this movie to get the directing credit, leaving only about 20% of the original material shot by Richard Donner in this movie. And it is quite different in the way that things do happen. But the movie starts off by revisiting the beginning of the first movie in the trial of General Zod and his minions. We're reminded of the guilty verdict over his coup to try and take over the council and take over governance of the planet, and their sentence to the Phantom Zone. After that, we then get a refresh into the events of the first movie during the opening credits, which is a really cool way of reminding us of what happened, really. We're then reintroduced to Clark Kent, catching up with him on his way into the Daily Planet, where he learns that there is an incident going on in Paris. There are a group of terrorists reported to have held hostages at the Eiffel Tower and are in possession of a hydrogen bomb as well. So he sees the danger there. And where's Lois Lane? Of course, she's right at the heart of the action. The best reporter has been sent there to report on the most dangerous situation going on in the world at that moment. So of course, Superman predictably is going to go to France, going to go to Paris to go and save Lois Lane. And it's a good thing he does, because she decides to get very close to the action, to the point where she is almost in an arm's reach of the terrorists with the bomb armed. Before they can detonate anything, Superman takes the bomb, he takes it out into space and it explodes. And the shockwaves of that explosion hit General Zod inside the Phantom Zone. The Phantom Zone shatters, the prison is open, Zod and his two minions are out and free to seek revenge for their incarceration. So we catch up with Lex Luthor, who's still in prison alongside Otis, and during this time there's a conversation that takes place between them about Superman's habit of flying north every time he's finished saving lives. And this sort of interests Lex Luthor, because he understands that clearly there's a reason why he's doing this, and has an instrument in the form of a black box which can perhaps lead him to what it is that Superman is going to each time. Luthor manages to stage an escape from the prison, and afterwards he manages to make it up to the north and discovers the Fortress of Solitude. Once inside, he activates the crystals and learns about the history of Krypton, including Zod's revolution. We then go back to Lois and Clark, and we begin to see the B-plot of this movie take shape. Whilst at Niagara Falls, pretending to be a newlywed couple in order to uncover some sort of scam that's going on there, Lois sees Clark without his glasses and realises that actually there is a similarity between him and Superman. This is just confirmed to her when there's a young boy who falls into the falls and Superman appears out of nowhere and comes in and saves him. And she puts two and two together and realises that, well, Clark was here, but he's now gone and Superman has appeared. So there must be something to it. And she's so sure about her theory that she decides to put her own life at risk in order to force Superman out to save her. She jumps into the falls and believes that Clark is going to expose himself as Superman in order to save her. But Clark is a lot more savvy than that, and he decides to use more subtle techniques and tactics to save her without revealing that he is in fact Superman. Lois then begins to doubt herself and starts to rubbish away any theory she had that Clark Kent is in fact Superman, until they end up back at a hotel and Clark accidentally drops her hairbrush into the fire. He reaches in to the hot fire to take it out, and Lois sees that he's got no burns, no injuries to his hand, and then again deduces that he must be Superman. You can see that the weight of trying to hide this secret and not being able to share it with anybody is taking its toll on Clark, and before he tries to once again engage with the lie, he lets it drop and reveals that in fact he is Superman. But before he shares everything with Lois, he decides to take her to the Fortress of Solitude so she can learn everything there is to know about him. And it's here that Clark, or Superman, makes the ultimate sacrifice, in that they decide to sacrifice their powers and live as a mortal being in order to live with Lois. He enters a molecular chamber which has harnessed the power of the red sun of Krypton, and it strips away his powers. It essentially makes him an everyday human man. Initially, Clark is happy with this decision. He's happy that he's given this up for Lois, until they go to a diner and he encounters a very, very rude person who needs to be taught some manners. Unfortunately, Clark, living a life of never experiencing pain or any form of trauma or risk, has now got everything in abundance and can't adjust to it. So when he does get hit for the first time, he can't really recover from it, and it does take its toll on him. Whilst all of this has been going on with Clark and Lois, Zod and his minions have essentially landed on Earth and have just wreaked havoc across it. They have demonstrated their powers to be that of being the same as Superman, but there's 3 of them as a united front, which makes them a lot more dangerous. Realizing there's no way of matching, especially after an attack on the army was broadcast on TV, they fly to the White House, they invade the White House, and they make the president kneel before them. And the president does contact all the other world leaders. They're all in agreement that all power has to be referred to General Zod. So Zod is effectively now in charge of planet Earth, and there's only one person that can stop him, and that's Superman. But Superman no longer has his powers, which is a bit of an issue. Luckily, though, there is one crystal that has survived the destruction of the Fortress of Solitude, which came about after he removed all of his powers. And in using this, he was able to regain the powers and go to war with General Zod. Before he can get there, Lex Luthor rears his head again and essentially nominates himself to be a representative from planet Earth to the human race to Zod. He explains that he can offer up who Superman is and take him to Superman in order for Zod to kill him, so therefore the only threat to his rule is then nullified and eliminated. They end up at a Daily Planet where Clark is nowhere to be found. Instead, they take Lois, and at that point Superman turns up, tries to battle the 3 of them, but is heavily outmatched. With no choice, he flies off to the Fortress of Solitude, where he gets some added strength behind him. Zod and his minions are convinced by Luthor to go and chase after Superman and hunt him down, just to eliminate him and get rid of him. And that's exactly what Zod does. Zod takes Lois, seeing that she is a weakness of Superman's, so he's better off having her with him that he can exploit, but also does take Luthor with him too. There is another battle at the Fortress of Solitude between the 3 evil Kryptonians and Superman. However, once again, they use their ace in the hole, which is Lois Lane being there, in order to bring Superman under obedience. Superman explains to Luthor that there's a molecular chamber there that he wants them to get into because that will strip away their powers. And Luthor does, as Lex Luthor always does, and double crosses Superman and tells General Zod about the molecular chamber. They order Superman to get inside. Superman does. However, what has happened is he has reversed everything, so everybody outside of that chamber this time has their powers stripped or becomes mortal human, and he remains safe inside, knowing that Luthor was likely to double cross him. Once that's all done, he just absolutely wipes the floor with Zod and his minions. They fall through the clouded sort of area down the bottom to their death, seemingly into an endless pit, and yeah, it's all happily ever after. Lex is left at the North Pole without any means of getting back, and Clark flies away with Lois. But there is still just one loose end, and that comes about with Lois Lane still wrestling with knowing who Clark Kent really is. Unable to have this conversation with anybody. And you see this eating up at her inside, and it's almost as if she is wrestling with the burden that he has always had with trying to maintain a secret identity. And seeing the toll it's taking on Lois, Clark decides to wipe her mind of that knowledge, planting a kiss on her lips and then stripping away what she knows about him from her mind. The movie then ends with Clark hilariously getting his own back, getting his revenge on the guy from the diner who beat him up needlessly, really, by just making a mockery and humiliating him in front of all the other diners, and then continues on to help rebuild the White House with the president and apologising for his absence seemingly committing to his role as Superman and protector of planet Earth. This movie is absolutely superb. It does everything that a sequel is meant to do. It takes everything from the first one and just raises the stakes of it. The fact that you've got the Kryptonians back, who are ultimately exactly the same power level as Superman. They have everything that he has to offer, and also they know how to use it to deadly effect. They're also motivated by revenge from the sins of the father, effectively, trying to get revenge on Jor-El by killing his son as well on planet Earth. And I do like the storyline of Superman sort of wrestling with the idea of whether he wants to be that protector or whether he wants to have the human life that he's never ever really had. And it's interesting because when you see him growing up in the first movie, all he wants to do is show what he can do, almost not wanting to have that human life that's been thrust upon him. Whereas this time, he's now lamenting for that human life that he will never have. And what this teaches him is that he, as Jonathan Kent said in the first movie, he's been brought here for a reason. And that reason isn't a selfish purpose. It is to protect those who need it. He now shoulders that and accepts that role, and sacrificing his own happiness and everything that he wants personally in order to make that happen. Once again, Christopher Reeve just knocks this out the park with his portrayal of both Superman and Christopher Reeve, just maintaining that difference in between them and treating them as two different characters, as you should do. It's always a joy to see him on the screen, regardless of whichever role he's performing. Gene Hackman's screen time is very limited in this movie, partly because there's so much to juggle, but when he is on screen, he does drive that plot forward very nicely and is just as charismatic as usual. Terrence Stamp as General Zod is very imposing on screen. His just icy cold stare, his very pale skin, and just his whole demeanour is very. He does just take on. It just appears to be militarized. He appears to be a real general. You can see he's just cool, calm, collected. There's nothing that's phasing him. He's just taking everything in, just analyzing what he can do, and everything he does is done with a purpose, and it's done with maximum, or with the intention of causing absolute maximum mayhem and maximum effect. And it works. With all that said, there's just something missing with this compared to the first movie for me. And I think it's the charm of the first movie. I think it's just the fact of the first movie, it just felt like a achievement in cinema. And this one is just a continuation of that. It's not to take away from this movie, because this movie is still fantastic. But for me, I think there is just a level, it just takes a level down from the first one, through no fault of its own, really. And this movie was Christopher Reeve's favourite and what he believed to be the best one out of the entire series. And so far, I can see exactly where he's coming from. It's just purely a personal preference for me to prefer the first one. But with that being said, I am going to give this movie 4 stars because it is brilliant. So what did you guys think of Superman 2? Whatever your thoughts are, just pop them in the comment section below. I'd love to have a read and hear what you have to say. We will be returning again with Superman 3, but until then, you guys take it easy, and I'll catch you again on the next one.